By profession, I'm not an environmentalist, even though I've been working on this for 12 years. I'm actually a systems specialist. But as a systems specialist, I've understood how things change. Things change. We assume that things change linearly, but in reality, things change in a very abrupt, non-linear fashion. You never know when this whole world is going to be vegan. Okay? That's the process we are on. In 1995, I was working on the internet, and there was an article in Newsweek saying that the internet is going nowhere. Who's going to read things on the internet? Who's going to buy stuff off the internet? What is this for? And so I was part of the committee that was designing the protocols for the internet, and I was the systems guy there. So they asked me, we are having trouble getting 100 megabit to work. Can you take a look at the protocol and tell us what we need to do differently? Because our customers are complaining that when they click on a link, they get an hourglass instead of the data that they're looking for. So I looked at that protocol and I said, yeah, the protocol has issues, but on that cable, I can actually do a gigabit. I can make it run 10 times faster, and it will run so robustly that you will have no problems whatsoever. And people said, are you kidding us? We'll believe it when we see it. Dream on. Okay? But there was a confluence of things that happened at that time. The right technology came together, and the right power in our silicon came together at the right time. So we could do it. And within 3 years, it became a standard, and it just took off. The internet took off because it gave a really robust backbone to the internet. So in 2005, I overheard someone say, I don't think I can live without the internet. It had become such an integral part of our lives in just 10 years. So that was a nonlinear phase shift that happened in human societies. People couldn't imagine going back to the way they were 10 years ago. And in 2005, I was having dinner with someone, and he was telling me, you know what they're doing in San Francisco? They're asking men, they're letting men get married to men. I'm glad that the California Supreme Court stopped it. And you know what happened? In 10 years, it became normal throughout this country. So, and in 2015, I presented a paper at the AGU, which is the largest gathering of climate scientists in the world. So it was a joint paper with the University of Illinois. And we had done something very simple. We took all the grasslands that are currently being used for grazing animals, and we replaced them with the original forest that used to be there in 1800. And just added up the numbers to see how much carbon gets sequestered, if we just did that. So it's just an experiment to see what would happen if the whole world goes vegan. And it turned out that only 41% of the grasslands used to be forests in 1800. The other 59% were deforested before 1800. So we have no data on that. But on that 41%, we were able to sequester more carbon than we've added to the atmosphere since 1750. Okay. This is the result that Evan was talking about. You can literally reverse climate change. So we made that presentation, and over 100 climate scientists came by and talked to us during the course of the conference. And they said, you're right. Yeah, these numbers, they can't dispute it. They just have to add it up, right? They can do it themselves. But they never did, right? They said, you're right, but this will never happen. Dream on. I've heard this before. So by 2025, I told them it will be normal. The whole world will be vegan. Okay? So that, to me, was like the third time I've heard this. The third time it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I've been working on this since 2005. So 2005, I happened to see Al Gore's presentation on TV, and I was so shocked. I said, if half of what he's saying is true, everybody should be working on this full time. Why isn't anybody doing this? So I decided to study the problem, and within a few months I realized that it is far worse than what he's saying. Literally what he is doing in his presentation is like what animal shelters do, euthanasia. So it's literally about managing the symptoms, so to speak. He wasn't talking about healing the climate. So what we started in 2007, Climate Healers is the exact analog of what you did. So it is a no-kill planet rescue. This is what we are doing. Okay? No-kill planet rescue. We don't want to kill billions of animals and billions of people and then say, okay, how can we patch it up? This is what they're doing. So we started this in 2007. I wrote to him and I said, how can I help you? And I got trained by him in 2006. And I was giving his presentation. But in 2006, something else happened. There was a report by the livestock industry, literally it was the livestock industry. They admitted that animal agriculture was responsible for 18% of all greenhouse gas emissions. That was the livestock's long shadow report that came out of the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. So I got a bunch of my friends in the Al Gore's Climate Reality Project to send a letter to him. So we sent a letter to him saying, we have to start talking about this. There is nothing in our presentation about animal agriculture. We have to start talking about this. So about 70 of my friends signed that. We sent it to him, and I got an email reply back from him saying, it's not as bad as you think. Basically continue doing the presentation because we don't want to confuse people. So maybe he knows better than I do, so I'm going to have to wait and see what happens. Then in 2009, there was a report by Goodland and Anhorn, and they basically said that animal agriculture was responsible for 51% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And if you look at their report, they are pointing out the things that the FAO deliberately missed. They missed it. Literally didn't take into account the three biggest components of emissions. One was the avoided carbon sequestration from all the land that we are currently using for grazing animals. If we just return it back to forests, they didn't take that into account. Secondly, they didn't take into account all the degradation that happens on land. 20% of the land area of the planet is being degraded every year from overgrazing. And they are not taking that into account. Okay? And the third, the methane emissions, they were using 100-year averaging. So they didn't want to, so when you do 100-year averaging, you're basically discounting it by a factor of 3 to 4. That's not nature. Nature doesn't do creative accounting. Nature is going to give you what you ask for. So then I wrote to Mr. Gore and I said, come on, we have to talk about this. This is the #1 issue. And this time, I did not get an email reply back.
Wow.
Instead, I got a phone call from the group, from the administration, saying that we hear that at the next training, there is going to be a protest. Protesters are asking us to talk about this. And are you part of the protest? And I said, I'm not part of the protest, but I know the protesters. I think they have a valid point and need to pay attention to them. See, I was one of the mentors. I was supposed to be inside helping him do the training. So I went there, and the first thing they did was they asked all of the mentors not to go out and talk to the protesters. So they gave us a piece of paper and said, please don't go out and talk to the protesters. So I went and talked to the protesters. Because at that point, I was upset. I said, we've been trying to get you to talk about this, and you're not even responding. And I'm here as a volunteer. I'm paying my own way to come here and help you out. And you're treating me like this? No way. So I went out and talked to the protesters, and I showed them the piece of paper. So they took a picture of it and put it up on Facebook. And the people went ballistic inside. They called me in and they said, did you show them the paper? And I said, yes, I did. So the next time you go out and talk to the protesters, we'll kick you out. I said, you're going to kick me out? Are you kidding me? I'm walking out.
Aww.
So I walked out. I walked out and I joined the protesters. So I realized at that point that there was something about this issue that they don't want to talk about. And it's not just Al Gore. Every environmental organization doesn't want to talk about it. Okay? So in 2013, we had the opportunity to executive produce a documentary called The Human Experiment, where we showed that we are pouring 250 billion tons of toxic chemicals into the environment every year, and it's not being regulated by the industry, not being regulated by governments throughout the world. They're just pouring it out there. If some neighborhood finds out, oh my God, we are poisoning our waters, they just move it from here to there. They do the same thing over there because they haven't found out yet. So the mercury thermometer factory from upstate New York went to India, and they polluted the rivers there because nobody knew that that's what they were doing. So this has been going on. It's just playing a shell game throughout the world. And they're pouring 250 billion tons. Just to put that in perspective, there are 7.5 billion of us. So that's like 30 tons per person per year. Can you imagine that? Yet nobody talks about it. Al Gore doesn't talk about it. 250 billion tons is 4 times the total amount of greenhouse gases we're pouring into the atmosphere. So he talks about that. In fact, he doesn't talk about all of it. He only talks about the carbon dioxide. He doesn't talk about the methane or the nitrous oxide or the other things that are caused by animal agriculture. He only talks about fossil fuels. So he doesn't talk about the chemical pollution. He doesn't talk about the animals that are being killed. Did you know that between 1970 and 2010, 52% of all wild vertebrates died?
Wow.
Did you know that?
No.
So this was a report that was done by the World Wildlife Fund, and it came out in 2014. And it basically said that 52%, in terms of biomass, 52% of them died off. That doesn't mean that 52% of extinction happened. It's just that there are fewer and fewer of the animals left. Okay? So I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, I'm doing mathematical calculations. So I said, 52% died off in 40 years. How many more years can we continue doing this? Between 1970 and 2010, human population doubled, and human per capita consumption roughly doubled. So our overall impact on the planet increased by a factor of 3.8. So if you just take an exponential curve that has gone up by 3.8 and you extrapolate that out and you see how many more years can we do this, it turns out to be 16 years. By 2026, at the current rate of decline, they'll be all gone. So that was my calculation in 2014. And I happened to be introducing my advisor for an award in California, actually. And my granddaughter was there in the audience, and she was born in 2010. So I made a pledge to her in public. I said, by 2026, when you are 16 years old, there will be more wild animals than when you were born in 2010. Everybody reacted the way you're reacting now. Everybody clapped. Everybody said, yes, we want to help you do this. What can we do? And I told them, please go vegan. And their response was, is there anything else we could be doing? They were not ready for it yet. Okay? So I was so shocked, and I said, well, what if my crude calculations are wrong, right? Maybe I'm being alarmist, I don't know. So let me wait and see what happens in the next report. So the next report came out in 2016, and it said that between 1970 and 2012, 58% of all wild vertebrates died, which means we were losing 3% per year. So that's when I said, that's it. We're going to have to go the other way. We're going to have to create a vegan world by 2026. There is no other way to solve this problem. Okay? We have to do this. All of us are going to have to do this. And trust me, people are going to respond. people are going to respond to us because, we normally think that there are 3 ways that people go vegan. There are 3 reasons for people to go vegan: for their health, for the environment, and for the animals. But there is a 4th way, which is actually the most important reason why people go vegan. You know what that is? It's for love. It's for love. And that's the only reason that sticks. None of the others do. If you do it for love, you will never go back. It could be love of the animals. It could be love of the earth. It could be love of some human being. Or love of yourself. If you do it for that reason, you will never go back. So that's what we need to convince our friends and family. We need to convince our friends and family that this is a very important movement now. This is the most important thing that we have ever done as a species in our entire history. We have to transition from this culture of normalized violence that we have inherited to a culture of normalized non-violence. And we have all the ingredients. We have all the ingredients we need to do that. Just like I said in 1995 that we have all the ingredients to get a gigabit going, we have all the ingredients to do a culture of normalized non-violence. We are connected across the whole world. We have compassion for every animal, every life. It's within us. In my talks, I ask people, how many of you are vegan? And usually, only about 20% of my audience raises their hands. Then I ask them, how many of you would deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? Nobody raises their hands. And I tell them, by definition, all of you are vegan. Except who you are and what you do are not in alignment. And we are all getting there. Because when you're not in alignment, you're suffering. I know you're suffering. You can't hide that from me, right? You're suffering, and so when you realize that you're suffering, your instinct is to overcome that suffering. So you are going to go vegan. So it's about accelerating that. Okay? That instinct is always there. It's already there. It's about accelerating that. But we are facing very powerful interests. Okay? A very powerful interest for holding it the way it is. They are the ones who are preventing Al Gore from talking. They are the ones who are getting the government to subsidize foods that are carcinogenic to our children. So we did 3 documentaries. The human experiment was about the chemicals that we're pouring into the environment. Then it was Cowspiracy in 2014 that showed that the animal agriculture industry has gotten to the environmental NGOs. The environmental NGOs don't want to talk about it. Okay? And then we did What the Hell, which showed that the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare NGOs also don't want to talk about the impact of animal agriculture. And you know what those 3 showed us? Is that there is a huge economy built around pouring these toxic chemicals into the environment, concentrating them in animal foods, persuading people to eat those animal foods, and then fixing them once they get sick. This entire thing is a substantial part of the economy. People are making money off of this. And they don't want to change. They're literally farming us. Just like they farm the animals, we're also being farmed. And they're going to find all the useless human beings and try to get rid of them first. This is what's going on. If you notice, they're cutting all the social benefits. Unless you have money, they're not interested in you. If you have money, they want it from you. That's what's going on. So, from the perspective of other species will look at us and say, the Homo sapiens is a really sociopathic species, right? Right? So we are behaving as if we are a sociopathic species because we have given our power over to a few sociopathic people among us. We never agreed to this. It's not in any constitution around the world. You look at any constitution around the world, it doesn't allow for concentration of power in just a few people, which is really what has happened. We can take back that power. We can take back that power because we are voting 3 times a day. And whether they get the power or we have the power ourselves. There's one thing that we as human beings can do that no other species can do. We can coordinate our actions. We can do things together in such large numbers. We are really the mammalian bee. Billions of us can do things together. Gandhi showed the power of individual action. Way back 100 years ago, he came to India from South Africa and he actually started the Khadi movement in 1918, exactly 100 years ago. And in there, he asked the people of India to change their clothes. Change their clothes from British clothes to Khadi clothes made by Indians in India. And at first, everybody laughed at him. You're taking on the mightiest empire the world has ever seen by changing your clothes. How is that going to get rid of them? But he convinced enough people. He convinced enough people to change their clothes. He convinced Rabindranath Tagore. He convinced a lot of leaders to do it. And he actually wrote in the Navjivan magazine, "It is my duty to induce people by any honest means necessary to wear khadi." So he was a very militant activist. He went around telling people, change your clothes. Why are you wearing that? Change your clothes. And within 12 years, he had bankrupted the textile mills in Manchester. And that was the largest industry in England at that time. Just 12 years. Then the British government was on its knees begging to negotiate with him. Okay? So it took 12 years for him to unite India together. People saw everyone wearing the same clothes and they said, yes, you and I are together in this. So it was a simple act that anybody could do. It was a substantial act and it was a spiritual act because it connected people together. We are facing the same thing now, 100 years later. And this time it's global, it's not just India. Globally we have to free ourselves from this oppression. And instead of changing our clothes, we need to change what we eat. It's as simple as that. It's a simple act, but it is a substantial act. I have this thought experiment where I tell people, imagine that you can get 7.5 billion people to come together and eat. How big of a dining hall do you need to accommodate them? Can you guess how big of a dining hall we'll need? So, a fast food regulation requires 12 square feet per person. So 7.5 billion people turns out to be about 60 miles on a side. It's not that big. You can build it in the Bay Area and get 7.5 billion people to come and have dinner together. Okay? If you did that, what would be your menu? So if you fed them an organic vegan menu, you will need 1.5 million tons of food per meal. Roughly half a pound per person. And at the end of the meal, you can take the seeds from your meal and go and replant 1.5 million acres of land. And you can do that for the next 8,000 meals and still not cover all the land we're using for animal agriculture today. And after those 8,000 meals, that'll be like roughly 8 years. In 2026, you will live in Eden. That will be Vegan World 2026. Or you can feed them what they're eating today. If you feed them what they're eating today, you will need 9 million tons of food. 6 times as much food as we eat. 3 pounds per person, not half a pound per person. Why? Because the other 2.5 pounds is being fed to the animals who are hanging outside. We are feeding them 2.5 pounds per person, and in return they are giving us 1 ounce per person. That's how inefficient this system is. 40 to 1 reduction. So they only give us 1 ounce per person, so everybody says, oh my God, I need more than that. because the average American eats 3 ounces per person. So some people have to get more, some people have to get less. So you fight, you compete. For every meal you have to go kill 2 billion animals. Who's going to do that? In all of my audiences, nobody wants to kill animals, but they're eating them. So you have to persuade someone to go kill the animals. So you pick on people. Pick on the colored people. Right? Pick on the weak people. This is really what's going on. You create this environment of scarcity, and then you create all these oppressions within that. It comes from just the meal we are eating. It's that powerful. It's that powerful. So you can either save the planet, or you can destroy the planet, just by choosing your meal correctly. So we now have to convince all of our friends and family how important this is, and get them to understand and take that step themselves. So I paraphrase Gandhi. I say it is our duty to induce people by any honest means necessary to go vegan. Okay? This is our duty. And all the resources you need for doing that is available to you. All the education you need is available to you. I have done 12 years of research on this, and every bit of my research is on my website, climatehealers.org. Okay? You can read it up, it's all free. And you can download the slides that I use, it does all of the data, and you can give that slide presentation yourself. All the slide notes are available online. Okay? So, climatehealers.org.
Oh, Climate Healers, thank you. Thank you.
So we can do this. We can do this. You know, my inspiration is my granddaughter. She was born in 2010, and when she was 4 years old, I pledged to her that there'll be more wild animals when she's 16 than when she was born. And one day, I read a story to her, you know, when she's home with us every night. And after her story, she said, "Grandpa, who were the first human beings?" And I tried to explain to her about evolution. So I told her, imagine you're standing on the street and you're holding your mama by your hand, and you get your mama to come, get her mama to come by her side, and you keep doing that. And on the other side of the street, you get a chimpanzee to do the same thing with her mama. Get her mama to come and then get her mama, and so on. By the time the line goes from Phoenix to Tucson, the two lines will merge. Both lines will say, "That's my mama too." And her eyes went huge. Listening to this, she said, "Are you telling me that animals are my family? Why are people eating my family? Please make them stop, Grandpa, please make them stop." And I told her by 2026, they're going to stop. They're going to stop. And she said, "Can you please give me a pinky promise?" Because you can never break a pinky promise. And I did. I gave her a pinky promise that by 2026, it'll be a vegan world.
Yes.
And the next day, she came to me and she said, "I heard I gave you a very difficult job." I think her mom told her, "What did you get Grandpa to promise you?" So, you can take 1 more year. So, if you do it by the time I'm 17, I'll be happy. I said, "No, Kimaya, I think I'm going to do it for your sweet 16th birthday." We are going to have to do this, because we have no choice but to do this, and I think we're going to do it. Because I have so many awesome people helping me. Thank you very much.